Ethics for Lightworkers Workshop: The History and Challenges of Metaphysical Practices. From the beginning of time, all cultures in one way or another have utilized metaphysical practices. Prophets, seers, and healers have played a large role in shaping our society and various religions throughout history. Shamanism has been regarded as one of the world's oldest religions. Evidence of shamanic practice have been found in Paleolithic cave art, which was practiced by many different cultures and still is today. The ancient Egyptians had healers and sunus, as well as oracles and seers, who were highly regarded in their society and were considered to be part of the upper class. Hinduism honored sages and rishis as divinely inspired philosophers, yogis, saints, and leaders with direct knowledge of the universe and absolute truth. Even Christianity had its share of metaphysical practices and believed in prophets, seers, and those who can heal the sick. So, what changed? Well, nothing exactly changed. Just as long as there have been metaphysical practices, there has always been some level of persecution of them. As the world's population grew, so did the need to conquer new lands. With that came colonization and religious wars, which brutally forced those inhabiting the lands to conform to new religious beliefs. Everyone knows Nostradamus, the famous French astrologer, chemist, physician, and seer. His family converted from Judaism to Catholicism to avoid persecution. Nostradamus' grandfather taught him ancient rites of Jewish tradition and the teachings of astrology, giving him the idea of the heavens and what might drive human destiny. He was highly sought after and was invited to Queen Catherine, wife of King Henry II of France, to create horoscopes for her children. However, he had his share of critics throughout his career and was even expelled from his university, where he was seeking his doctorate after his work as an apothecary was discovered. Over hundreds of years, religion played a major role in demonizing others' beliefs and practices. In many cases, as in the Salem witch trials, people were put to death in order to create fear and conformity in the community. Then came modern spiritualism in the 1840s. Philosophers like Emanuel Swedenborg shifted society's concept of religion. Unlike traditional religions, it did not call for blind faith. Now people were able to get tangible proof of an afterlife by attending a seance. After countless experiments by cyclical researchers of the time, skeptics dismissed these experiences as delusion, even after the majority of the data found were unexplained phenomena. On top of everything else, today's serious metaphysical practitioners have a new set of hurdles to face: the charlatans. You know, the ones who tell you that if you pay them $500, they will remove the curse your neighbor put on you for not mowing your lawn. Or the $2.99 a minute psychic hotline that are told to speak slowly so the client stays on longer. Or the so-called healer who preys on people's pain and makes you believe that they have cleared your psoriasis, only to find out they have cleared your bank account instead. The majority of today's society is online, and now so is spirituality. This is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it helps us connect with others whom we might not have the opportunity to otherwise. However, with the rise of social media, scammers have an even bigger audience to prey on. As history tells us, a few bad apples do spoil the bunch. Authentic practitioners are often drowned out by the noise of those who are looking to cash in on the social trend. This makes those seeking authentic metaphysical services confused on whom and what to trust. So, what do authentic practitioners do? Well, aside from building an online community and marketplace for authentic and supportive practitioners, you listen to an expert who has over 30 years of authentic and ethical metaphysical practices, like Deborah Lynn Katz. Deborah has a PhD in psychology and holds a master's degree in social work. She established the International School of Clairvoyance in 2005 and has been the lead instructor since then. She is the author of the landmark books, The Complete Clairvoyant, a trilogy, You Are Psychic, The Art of Clairvoyant Reading and Healing, Extraordinary Psychic, Proven Techniques to Master Your Natural Abilities, Freeing the Genie Within, and Associative Remote Viewing, The Art and Science of Predicting Outcomes for Sports, Financials, Elections, and the Lottery. Deborah is an accomplished remote viewer, clairvoyant, medium, energy healer, and parapsychological researcher. She is the president of the International Remote Viewing Association. She is a former federal probation officer and TV show host. She believes that everyone holds intuitive potential and is dedicated to helping them discover this to levels they have never imagined were possible. Her website is www.deborahkatz.com.
Keep that in mind. All right. And so I just wanted to also just share a little bit about my background. When I was first starting off in my late 20s, where I started to attend classes and really develop my clairvoyance, I ended up like really going from someone who was very career oriented. I was a federal probation officer. I had a big spiritual awakening as I was developing my intuitive abilities, and I ended leaving that whole 3D world job and deciding I was going to dedicate myself to my spiritual work. And at the time, I had no idea what that meant. I just knew that I had to do that. So I ended up going to the Philippines to study with the faith healers for about a year. Then I came back, had a son somewhere in between that time, and then moved to Sedona, Arizona, where I first started to actually charge for my services. So I went through about a 13-month intensive training program, initially at the Berkeley Psychic Institute and Asclepion Healing Center and a couple other places. After 13 months, then when I was in the Philippines for a year, many people didn't have access to medical care there. Like if you didn't have all the money you needed to pay for even your supplies, like your IV drip, or if you couldn't pay for everything up front, you would just be denied services. And so I was traveling with my boyfriend at the time, who I met over there, who was an acupuncturist, and he would oftentimes treat the people who couldn't afford to go into the hospitals. And sometimes they didn't respond too well to acupuncture, so then I would work with them. So I really had a unique situation where we were the last resort for people who had no other means to have help. And sometimes we were actually able to help them. Sometimes they just died even before they left the parking lot of the hospital. And so it was a very unique situation, but I really didn't start to charge for my services until I came back to the States. And then I worked in a couple different metaphysical centers, bookstores in Sedona. And I'll just say one more thing about that. I encountered so many different people during the course of a few years working in Sedona, so many tourists and so many different walks of life. And I would be doing professional work, but at the same time, I was constantly practicing and offering services for free just so I could practice. So I literally put in like thousands of hours of practice before I actually started to charge for my services. And then once I did, there were so many circumstances that I encountered that were super challenging. And my life at the time, when I came back to the States and I had my son, I moved to Sedona when he was only 4 months old, and it was just me and him. We had no financial help from anyone. And so I was perpetually broke for like the first 5 years of his life. And so I was constantly up against situations where I really needed money. There were many times where I could hardly pay our $500 a month rent, and we were living in like this tiny trailers and places like that. I think one place we were paying $350 a month, and it was still hard to come up with that. And so I was constantly put in these situations where I had to make decisions where I could have gotten a lot more money really quickly, really fastly, but I would have had to compromise my ethics and morals and sometimes jeopardize myself or other people. And so one during the course of 1 week, that very unusual things happen when you're in Sedona, and sometimes like whatever issues you're working with, like they really come to the surface. And I remember in the course of 1 week, I encountered 5 different compromising situations. For example, I was told to come and audition for a TV show as a psychic, and it was a Miss Cleo TV show. And I thought, oh, great, like they're looking for psychics to be on the Miss Cleo like infomercials. Well, I came to find out that they were not just looking for like people to be on these commercials, but to say they were actually Miss Cleo. And if you got accepted and you started to do readings with their organization, when people called you, you would have to tell them that you were Miss Cleo, even though that wasn't your real name. So I just told them straight out when they offered me the position, I was just like, no way, I'm not going to do this. And then other circumstances, I had like clients who offered to like take me into their house and they would pay all my expenses, give me a car, support me. I might just have to give them some fringe benefits on the side. So there were some like a lot of sexually compromising situations. People would come over. This was so bizarre. Like even people would knock on my door. And during this 1 week in particular, this couple that I knew were not ethical at all, came to my door asking if they were going to start a telephone psychic hotline and would I join them. And so I was like, these people are even like hunting me down, coming to me. And I had to just constantly say no. And what I found over the years, even though it was really hard at times, is keeping to my ethics and morals. It never served me wrong. It never did. I sometimes had to go find different work and find additional ways to support myself. And that's part of what I'll be talking about tonight as we go through some of our different answers. But in the now 27 years or so that I've been doing this, I have had very few problems overall outside of different moments where I had to make these decisions, but things have gone very smoothly, and it's been way less stress for myself and less stress for other people. And I'm always looking at that, like how can I help others, but also balance it so I have the least amount of stress in my life. And so that's kind of the premise that I'm coming from here. So just if we have so much to cover, I don't want to take too long here, but ethos means custom or character in Greek. And this is a word that came from Aristotle and then was discussed by Plato, referring to a man's character or personality, especially in its balance between passion and caution. Today, it's used to refer to the practices or values that distinguish people, organizations, or society from others. And I found it interesting when I was going through graduate school and we were studying the different philosophers that Aristotle, Socrates, Plato, they spoke about self-reflection, because I guess before their time, like not a lot of people at least talked about self-reflection. They talked about service to each other and to mankind. And you have to underline the word man, because even as they talked about these lofty values, they were still having slavery. They thought very little of women. In fact, it was much more relationships between two men were considered much more lofty and compared to a relationship between a man and a woman. And for that reason, it was even okay for instructors to have for the philosophers or teachers to have sexual relationships with their male students. So they had a very different practices than what we would think was anywhere close to being okay today, and yet still they were developing their moral code. So things change over time. And some of what the topics we'll talk about today, not anything like that extreme, but we may encounter some discrepancies or conflicts between other religions and their values, or scientific groups like certain psychological practices. What I'm going to be doing is trying to put my answers in terms of these ethical questions into terms that would fit within the society we live in. So we live in a society where the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, they have a lot of power, and we have to deal with them. And for some of you I know are licensed psychologists or licensed social workers or licensed nurses or doctors and all sorts of professions. And so how can we do our work as light workers or intuitives or healers? How can we do that within a society where we have to fit ourselves into these kind of a more materialistic view of looking at life and rules and restrictions? And I think there is a way to balance all of that. So that's what I want to speak about in terms of when I'm going to just give my 2 cents about these different topics, is thinking about that. How can we not get in legal trouble? How can we not get in trouble or get others upset with us? And also, how can we make sure that we are, there's a reason why certain practices develop and why there's certain a mindset from medical practitioners or from these associations. They have guidelines and rules for their own licensed people, and those aren't just like haphazardly constructed, but sometimes they do conflict with our ability to see past the physical and the material and into a person and their field and their spirit, some aspects that are oftentimes, or maybe usually, not even considered, at least in the medical profession. So, if for the AMA, even like spiritual considerations and intuitive and energy, it doesn't even exist, then how do we fit in where our work is all about that? And I think there is a way to unite the two. So I'm just going to go, well, this workshop's intended to create a comprehensive understanding of our rewarding yet delicate role as light workers and our ethical responsibility to those we serve. We will take a look at the ethical standards of a light worker, the risks of practice, how to create an ethical practice, and the hard questions we need to ask. And Theon had listed these out, and I totally agreed with them. So do no harm, set clear boundaries and expectations, be in service to others, be authentic, balance your own needs with your clients' needs. That's a big one, and that's a theme that we're going to follow throughout this whole talk. Have self-awareness, live with integrity, and learn from and admit mistakes. You can learn how to develop your psychic and healing abilities, but can you learn how to care about others as deeply as yourself? I'm not really sure if you can. I think so many of the people that are here today do already have this. You care about others as much as yourself. You want others to do well and to be healthy and to live the best lives that they can. And you want that so much that oftentimes you would sacrifice yourself, or you do sacrifice yourself. And in saying this, some of what I'm going to be saying later is like to get balanced with that, because if you sacrifice yourself too much, then there's not enough of you to go around, and you won't be able to stay in this work for a very long time at all. You'll experience burnout. But most of you are here because you do so much care about others. And I think that there's ways where you can, like, let's say you're having a bad day. When we tend to be in pain or not feeling well or stress, we do get more narcissistic. We do tend to put more attention on ourselves. And there's things that we can do before a session with someone, like just kind of talk ourselves through it, or think about like, okay, I have to put myself aside right now. Even though I'll be learning during the session and growing and healing myself, but I need to put everything else aside and focus on this person. And so we can psych ourselves up, but I really feel like some people just have this like innate, deep-seated desire to see wellness in other people. And that is the healing power. When I've done readings over the years, and I've people haven't told me they were energy healers, but it just became very apparent during their reading. And when I was looking at that, with every once in a while, I would see with some people, they might have all sorts of fancy healing techniques. And, I teach healing techniques and reading techniques myself. But sometimes I've seen with people like that, they don't even need these techniques. Like really what was working for them was that this deep-seated desire, it's like the natural healing process in the body where you cut yourself. You could be sitting there thinking, oh, cut, would you please heal up? I need you to heal. But really your body's already going to do that. And that's the natural power we have within ourselves when we get with someone and we just so much want them to heal, and especially when they want to heal, and together we come, and that's where there's transformation. Of course, sometimes what you're doing mentally or visually or, with different energies can make a difference too, but those are kind of almost more icing on the cake. So what if I feel like my client needs further help? Okay, so now we're getting into, there's going to be a lot of questions here. So I'm going to approach most of these slides from questions that various people and students over the years have had. And again, I want to thank Dayan for laying these questions out very nicely here. So what if I feel like my client needs further help? Is it okay to recommend they meet with me again? So this first topic has to do with, there's so much wrapped up in this. What do we do if we're in the middle of a session or at any point and we feel like, okay, like this probably helped a little bit, but I'm just getting the sense that this person needs a lot more help. So what do I do? Because there can be, really, I should title this conflict of interest. If I recommend that they meet with me again, is it a conflict of interest? Because especially if I'm charging with them or charging them, then am I, what if I'm doing it because I want to make more money from them? Or what if they think I'm going to want to make more money from them? And maybe that's not the case at all. I just think they need help. So what do I do here? So for this question, what I would say is to give them options, to let them know, okay, like I feel like you could benefit from further help. And maybe you have someone in mind for them, like maybe, we only got to a few of your questions here, and I know you have so much more, so we could meet again if you'd like to do that. Like that would be, I don't see that as a conflict if you, spent an hour or however long and you just they had 20 questions, 30 questions. So it's like, okay, we got to as many as we could, but, why don't we get together again in the future if you'd like, and we could answer your additional questions. So that would be one way of working with that. But if you feel like they really, like you have a sense they need more healing and help, then let them know, like, well, we could get together again and work on this because it seems like it may be a longer term working through that you need here. But there's a lot of other people you could work with too. I just want you to know that I think you could use some additional support. And so, I'd love to work with you again, but there are many other people you could work with as well. And I'm happy to give you referrals. So making it so that you're not saying that you're the only source of their help. And And this is particularly important because people who are not coming from an ethical place, especially the people that, what would we call them? Diane had them in her slides. These would be really scammers, people that are offering psychic services who then are really doing it to get as much money out of a person as possible. Now, I'm not going to say that those people are fake psychics, because some of them are very psychic. In fact, they're so psychic, they know how to use their psychic abilities to give the people enough information. Sometimes it's paired with other research they do on the person, or just what is called cold readings, where they just ask the person questions and reflect it back to them. So some of those people, what they're doing is just giving people enough and then saying, oh, there's a curse on you, and if you want to get the curse off, I can help you, but I'm going to have to go purchase some expensive rare herb, and that's going to cost $1,000. But if you don't do this, you're going to be cursed for the rest of this lifetime and eternity. That's the basic setup. And so we want to be really careful that we are not doing anything of the sort and just giving them options. And then, should I offer packages to the person? That would be fine. But I would say that to have one of the things that's going to really help you from the beginning is to always have your prices published somewhere. And you never want to tell people at the end how much your services are going to cost. You should have them written out on a website, or if you're meeting with them in person, have it in writing somewhere, how much you charge, what your policies are. You should never spring a charge that they didn't anticipate on at the end. Now, oftentimes psychic hotlines will do this, and they will try to keep people, the administrators of these hotlines are oftentimes not practitioners themselves. Many times they're not even believers. They happen to, a lot of times they are more like telemarketing or telecommunications companies that at the same time they're running a psychic hotline, they're running a sex hotline. And so it's the same format of, hook someone in the first minute or two, get them to stay on, charge them $3.99, $4.99 a minute. And then, they're not going to realize at the end how much it's going to cost until they're totally done. So again, we do not want to do that. We don't want to surprise them. Because otherwise people are going to feel defrauded. You could get into legal trouble. There's going to be all sorts of conflicts. There's energetically, you're going to have to put up with a lot of negativity, and it's just not fair. And you, as the practitioner, you can't expect your client to be keeping time. Clients are ready when they come for any kind of a service, especially if they're enjoying the service. They are already anxious that it's going to be over too soon and that they're not going to have their questions or their needs addressed. So they're already like high anxiety. And the last thing you want to do is put that on them. So I've found it to be good practice to like really let them know what to expect. Like, okay, we're getting together, we're going to talk for a little bit. And then at the point we really get started, this is when I'm going to, usually we go for an hour. So we'll start the hour at the time we actually start the reading. Now, for me in particular, I don't like to feel rushed in my readings, just like many of you. Sometimes we have the information flowing right away and it's really, clear, and we could finish up with, like, some people, you tell them you're going to do an hour reading and they feel like you've covered everything like after 50 minutes or so. But sometimes the information is going to take much longer to come, or there's just so much to kind of work through. And so I just don't like to be in a rush. So I tend to tell people, like, my readings will be for an hour approximately. If we go longer, it's not going to cost you anything else. I don't want to be too free flowing with that, because, then people might try to keep you for an extra hour. But just kind of just assure them that they're not going to have these charges at the end, and about how much time they should expect. And letting them know, I'm going to do everything I can to, make you feel like you've gotten what you came here to accomplish today. And so offering package offers, that's great. But again, just make sure that you let them know ahead of time, this is what I have these packages. Like you could, have pay for 3 and you get an extra one thrown in there. I do want to say though, that when you have ongoing, like someone that in advance, you're going to meet with them, like say you're going to meet with them once a month, or they've purchased 4 sessions in advance, it does create some kind of energetic connection with that person. And over time, if you have too many clients with too much of that energetic connection, or for that matter, even just, a couple where they're like in between, they're thinking about you. And every time they encounter any little bit of stress, they think about the upcoming session with you. It's a lot more intense when you have these packages and they paid for them, and they know you're obligated, you're obligated. Energetically, it's a lot more messy. Because of that, early on, I personally decided to not offer packages. Now, I have a lot of clients, probably half of my clients tend to be repeat clients, but it's just, I don't know when we don't have such a strong energy connection in between. And in saying that, I understand that is like a lot of what I'm going to talk about here is not what like a marketing professional would say is the best thing to do. What I'm saying is what will be energetically the cleanest way to go about things. On a marketing perspective, sure, having people do packages is great. The other thing, which gets interesting because so many psychologists, the whole field of psychology is still very overall skeptical about psychic abilities. And some studies that have been done where they surveyed all different professions found that psychologists many times are the least open to psychic abilities, which doesn't make sense to me. And there's so many that are open to these things, but so many, especially like research-oriented or academic psychologists, are not. But it's interesting to me that so many psychologists, they do therapy and they plan that they're going to see their clients weekly, sometimes twice a week. I have a client who told me that she and her husband were having marriage problems, and they were seeing a therapist 3 times a week for a couple months. And she was like, yeah, that's getting super expensive. And so in some ways, it's really ironic because other practitioners don't have, an issue with having repeat clients. But the other thing I was going to say about that is that they also are the ones who are assessing whether or not the client should keep coming to them, which I really personally see, again, as a conflict of interest. Like, oh, yes, I think you need to come weekly for another 2 years before you're really okay, and pay me $150 an hour. That, there's something I think rather off about that, but that may be a topic for another group, maybe of licensed psychologists, to get their opinions on that. All right, considerations within this session: challenging clients. What to do when my client is a skeptic? Well, many clients are going to be skeptical. So skepticism is really a continuum. Some people are so skeptical that the only reason they're there is to challenge you. There are some skeptics that are very angry because this so much goes against what they believe that the only possibility, if you're offering intuitive or anything having to do with energy healing services, if that's not possible in their worldview, then that means the only possibility is that you are a fraud, or you are deluded and mentally ill. That's the only possibilities. However, I have found that with skeptics, there is something deeper in them, especially a skeptic that comes to a psychic to test them. There oftentimes is something deep within them that really wants to blow those pictures about and to blow open their worldview. They're really hoping that something could change that deep down, even though they wouldn't admit it, because really so many hardcore skeptics, they're just in intense pain. And, they don't really know that. They may know they tend to be depressed, but they're hoping for that. But still, they can be really obnoxious. And, when you go to do a reading with someone, like you think you're going to start to get information about them, but which you are, but you're already like feeling things. And when you encounter a skeptic in a reading, it's likely to just, your body is going to go into anxiety and nervousness even before you know that they're a skeptic. Sometimes even before the reading, you're going to go into that, like fear. You're going to hit like many times, like really strong fear. And then especially if the first thing out of their mouth is like, oh, well, I don't believe in all of this, but what color shoes am I wearing? Or, what's my sister's name? Like they'll just put things out like that. So I would say the way to deal with this is there's really two ways. One is to say, you know what, I'm not here to test the psychic. Like I don't have the bandwidth today or just the desire to like play this game. I'm here to really help people. So if you feel that way, like I just don't want to deal with this, then you could just let them know that, that's not what I'm here for. I don't think this is going to work out. The other option would be to challenge yourself and see, okay, let me see what I can get here. And is there anything, like, despite all their putting up and all their defenses and everything, is there something that I could tell them that would actually be meaningful and helpful for them? So, working through that energy and seeing where it goes could be rewarding. Or it could just be, you still do a good job and they still kind of slap you in the face or spit all over you. So you just never know. I've found over the years that I've done both approaches. And sometimes I was very glad that we just continued with this session and they did start to open up or said, I'm going to have to think about things now. Other times it just felt like, sitting there being abused. So just know that you have the power to end any session at any point. And we'll talk, there's lots of questions here around this about like, well, what do you do with payment and things like that? We'll get to that a little bit later, but just know if I was going to hardly have time to tell you anything here, it would be that you are in control of the session. You make the decisions. You never have to stay with somebody. You never have to complete the session, or, whether it's 1 minute into it or 45 minutes into it, it's up to you. And it doesn't matter what they think about that. Although in saying that, for some people, it will be very hurtful if you decide to end the session. What I've found, and there's many different reasons to want to end a session, and these will be coming up as we go forward. But what I found is there's times where I've said to the person, what, this doesn't seem to be going well, or I'm not comfortable with what's happening here. It seems like you're not comfortable with what's happening here. I'd like to just end this. And sometimes they would say, okay, great. And but more often than not, they would be like, oh, I don't want to end this. Like, I'll try to hold back. I'll stop talking, or I'll stop arguing with you, or, I'll try to be more open or something like that. So a lot of times they'll say that, and then the energy changes after that point. So I tend to now, like, if I do start to feel like I don't like what is happening here, I'll let them know that. And then be a little open to see what they how they respond, and if they're willing to change whatever they're doing at the moment. Considerations within the session. What if the client is overzealous and tries to make information fit in unintended ways? Well, after doing this for a little bit, I'm sure many of you who do intuitive sessions have noticed that, like, you might say something and maybe it hasn't really developed into anything all that specific yet, or you had a very clear sense of what it was meaning, but then they take it and kind of twist it around to mean something else. And you're like, no, that's not what I meant. Well, you can certainly tell them that. But you also have to keep in mind that everybody is processing information through their own filters and through their own pictures. So no one is going to have the same exact meaning of anything that you see or say or communicate. This is true not just like within a session, but just with even, anyone you communicate with. People are always perceiving things in slightly different ways, or sometimes drastically different ways. And so you don't, what would be an example? Like you just say anything to someone, and they, whether there might be an emotional charge on it, or they're just interpreting things differently. So just know that's already happening, and you're not responsible for the way completely that, like, you're not 100% responsible, maybe even 50% responsible of how they're interpreting it. But definitely, if you feel like, well, gosh, like I didn't even mean that at all, and they repeat back something to you that's just so far off, then just let them know, like, oh, I that's not really how I meant this. But don't get like too much into trying to assure that they understand exactly what you're saying. What to do when my client gets angry? Okay, so this is getting back to similar, like with what I was talking about with the skeptic. If your client is getting angry, well, you might feel that they're getting angry, and then you could address that. You may also hear that they're getting angry. So by feeling, I mean, your body may be you might yourself be matching them on an empathic level, and you go into feeling anger, and that might tell you, oh, my client's angry. Or they may be saying something, like they may be yelling at you. I've had clients just all of a sudden start to yell at me. And and sometimes it's at me, sometimes it's just like their response. And when that happens, you can, if it's ongoing, of course, like, you're doing an intuitive session or energy work, the last thing you need is someone to be yelling at you. You're needing to concentrate and focus and be in a deeper state, and yelling at you can take you out of it. Usually they are expressing their frustration, and they are just so wrapped up in what they're going through that they don't even realize that they're being like totally counterproductive at that moment. And so when that happens, like if anything is happening during a session where you feel you can now not do your best job, then it's up to you to let your client know that, like, every time you speak up, or when you're mad because you have something that you want to hear and you don't want to hear anything else. And I'm just wondering, even, why are we here? Because, like, are we here just so I'll tell you what you want to hear? Or are we here, so that we could find a way to help you hear and get to the truth? And just let it, like, reminding them that, like, if you want me to just like tell you what you want to hear, like, let me know that, like, I can do that if that's what you want, but that's not why I'm here. And so just communicating with them in a calm manner. And if they continue to like speak in a negative term, or do something that's getting in the way of you knowing that you could do the very best job, then I would recommend that you end the session at that point. And again, you never have to put up with abuse or something really unpleasant. I'm thinking of two situations I can remember. One, I was reading a man and a woman, and the man, he had always done what his wife, so as a man and wife, and he had always done, like for the last 20 years, what she wanted. And he was starting to now kind of get his own independence, and he wanted to move somewhere that she didn't want to move to. And as we were talking about that, she was getting more and more irate at him and at me. And that's where she was just like swearing at the top of her lungs. And I just said to both of them, I said to him, let's end the session here. If you and I can get together at a later date, but your wife is not invited to be in the session anymore. And another time I had a client, she was a pretty well-known TV and news producer, and she had a deal for her book, or she had been trying to get a deal for her book. She had some publishers interested, but she was coming for the reading because she was having financial problems, and she had invested a lot of money already into somebody else writing her book for her. And she wanted to know in the reading, was she going to get a $500,000 to $1 million advance? And when I looked at it, I did not see her getting even $500,000 advance. Like I saw her getting like a $50,000 advance. And this was a little tricky for me because I'm an author who's dealt with publishing companies for years. And, my advances were like $2,000. I think my first advance was $1,000. So I had two things going on. One was my own, like, well, gee, I got $1,000 advance. And now, like, this lady's being insistent that she get $500,000 advance. So that was my own issues coming through. Like I had to be really like self-reflective of, okay, I've got some biases here. But then she started yelling at me like, I need to get this advance. Nothing else is going to be okay. So then what was I supposed to do? Because how was I going to look at, if that's the only option, but maybe that's not what's going to happen, then there's no way that I can proceed here. So in that case, I just said, you know what, this isn't really working for me, and I'd like to end the session. And she wasn't happy about that, but I was already like, some of this is me, some of this is you. I'm not going to be able to do the best job for you, and I will give you a refund. What to do if my clients seem to have serious mental health issues? Well, in this case, what is a mental health issue? We can kind of break these down. And I think let me see if these next ones. Okay, so if you have a sense, and sometimes it'll just come up during a session that someone could really benefit from therapy. Sometimes you'll get a sense that someone is in therapy if you're doing an intuitive session. And then sometimes you're not sure, well, are they in therapy, or am I getting that they really need to be in therapy? But that's always an option to recommend to somebody, like whether it comes up intuitively or if you just end the session like something is not right and this person needs more help. Recommend that they go to a therapist. The only challenge is that a lot of people who come for readings, they are already they may be like psychically open themselves. They obviously like believe in psychic things. They would benefit from like energy work. And some therapists are so against that. And then some therapists also, if anyone says that they like see spirits or they see lights or, anything like that, the therapist will immediately think that they're hallucinating. So it's really beneficial to have like a list of therapists that are also metaphysical practitioners, spiritual practitioners, and licensed therapists at the same time. That tends to be, and thankfully, since COVID hit, there are more and more therapists that are doing therapy online. And so there's more people to refer people to now than it used to be really much harder to find these people. But yeah, to let them know, I think you need further help here. And of course, they may still benefit from energy healing and things like that. But having them really deal with a trained licensed therapist would be the best thing to recommend. Am I in the right space to perform my service mentally and emotionally? This is something you need to ask yourself. Now, this is hard and I'm sorry, I can see here, I did my slides so quick and I did not proofread them. So I am seeing many, many errors here. Apologize for that. So am I in the right space? Well, this is a question that you have to ask when you're just in practice for yourself. And it gets tougher when you're working for someone else. So whether you're working with someone like Thayan, who is offering a platform for people to do readings through, or you're reading at a bookstore, or you're sometimes that may make it feel like it's going to be harder to have a scheduled session, but then decide, you know what, I'm just not in the right space for this right now. Also, in our society, we have these different values that say, if you have an appointment, you should keep it. You're scheduled, you should be on time. And so we have all these social norms, and it can feel like so hard to say, like, oh gosh, I need to cancel this or reschedule. But when it comes to doing both readings and energy healing, we have to be in a good space. Now, that's not to say we have to be in a perfect space or an ideal space, because if that was the case, we would probably almost never end up doing readings, especially these days where we're so much working from home. It would get really, there's so much that can happen in your house, especially if you have kids or a spouse or pets, whatever it is, there's so much that can happen. And so you're not going to be in a perfect state. But if you're really distracted, if you're really tired, let's say you've done a reading already that morning and you know that like you maybe like it didn't go so well, and you're just feeling distracted, then it may be best to reschedule, even though the person may want to not reschedule and just ask for a refund. And then if you're working for other people, it's just really important that as whenever possible that you work for people that understand that. And I'm sure Thayan does. You'll have to discuss her policy for that. But there are some employers that do not understand that will get very upset if their readers cancel. And, those would be people to avoid if you possibly can. What do I do if I'm working under another business and not in a good space to do a session? Then, you have to follow your own morals. And if that means that they're going to fire you because, they say, well, you had already had, twice this month, you had to reschedule or cancel, and they're not good with that, well, then that's just too bad for them. How can I make sure I am compassionate, authentic to the client? Again, I think that just checking in with yourself before your session and just doing a check. Probably most of you do some kind of meditation practice before your session, and just having a talk with yourself. Again, I always like to say to myself, because I'm so busy every second of the day, and even in my sleep, I'm busy because I do dream work and I do so much around the clock. So I have to just stop and say, okay, now you're transferring your attention to your client. No one else is as important. Everything else is retreating. And, when you do that, it is like meditating. That's one of the value of that we do this work. And usually we end up feeling much better, or things have shifted by the time we're done with the session, because we were able to let go of all our worldly things, all our problems or things we had to do. We let that go. We put all our attention on the client. And when we come back to our lives, we're much better for it. Okay, how can I tell if what I'm seeing is in my imagination or a real message? You know what? I'm gonna skip this because this really gets more into intuitive training, and I know we have so much to get to, and I think that if we go into this whole discussion here, then we're not going to get to the other topics. But this would be more pertaining to like intuitive development or clairvoyant development or mediumship. So I'm going to skip this for now. How do I know when I am misrepresenting or forcing the message? Again, that's kind of part of the same thing. If I had to say anything, this is why my first book, You Are Psychic, The Art of Clairvoyant Reading and Healing, I talk about the power of clairvoyance and going into visual mode. And there's benefits to doing that because it can help get you out of the part of your brain that's more analytical. Also it can take some time to, if you're getting messages like from guides or input or telepathic messages, it can also take some time to develop the discernment between what's your own and what's other people's. Not that you're always going, or other, like your clients' telepathy or telepathy from spirits. This can take some discernment, and you're not always going to be able to tell for sure. This is where you don't want to just like jump into offering intuitive services to charge without first really having some experience under your belt, I would say. What if I receive a negative message for my client? So there are so many potential things that can come up intuitively that we will think are negative, and think that, oh gosh, I can't really talk about this because it'll be upsetting to my client. And one of the things I found, especially from new students who are just doing readings for the first time, is that they will think everything is negative. They will think, if I have a sense that my client is sad or depressed, or if my client wants to know about a job and it looks like it's not going to work out, or it's going to keep being stressful, they think that that's negative. And, on the other end of the spectrum would be seeing that someone is going to die, or seeing that someone's having an affair, or seeing that something is going to really be devastating that a person is really trying to have happen. So there are so many things. I would say we want to, and again, this is a topic we could talk about for hours and work with, but I would say just in a nutshell, if it's coming up, it's coming up for a reason. And if you can try to minimize, first it would be becoming aware. Are you processing every bit of information you get through the filters of negative or positive? Like, oh, I see a light around a person, that must be positive. Oh, I see a sad face, that's negative. How many of you are aware that you like process information through these filters of, or categorizing like constantly? It's like an obsessiveness of this is negative, this is positive, they're going to like this, they're not going to like this. And so just being aware that you do that, because that's all extra noise. It's judgment, it's evaluation, and it's just extra noise in your head that you don't need to have when you're doing readings. And of course, it's easier said than done. You're not going to get rid of that completely. Sometimes going into a deeper trance state can help, just being aware of that. And then just trusting that things, if a person's having an experience now, or they're going to be having it later, it does not help if someone's sad, but you don't address it. Maybe that's why they're there, is to like address it. So you have to address it. And if you avoid it, then oftentimes you're going to find that you are avoiding the very thing that they came there to have help with. And they, most of the time, are aware of these things that are coming to you. And I really do feel like we have a psychological defense mechanism within ourselves. So if it's something that we really couldn't handle, or they couldn't really handle, we just won't see it for the most part. It's just probably not even going to come up at all. So, I think it then gets into communicating compassionately, and also don't leave a session with just like, oh, I see, like, your life is a mess, or no, you're not going to get this job. This doesn't look like you're going to get it. Okay, thank you. See you later. No, it's like, okay, if something looks troublesome, then use whatever you are doing with them to look to see what is going to help them with the situation. So if you communicate in a compassionate way, and then you also always look for, okay, what will help them in this situation, and share that, then whatever you're thinking is negative, you'll be able to mitigate. And sometimes I do what I call like double checking. Like if I see something that looks like really could be potentially upsetting to them, I might hold off until like a little bit later in the session, until the information comes up again. And just going through here, can I add my own personal experience if I think it'll help the client? And I just want to say, Thayan, if you see anyone with any comments or anything, please feel free to interrupt me. I know that like we have a lot of items here, and I see people looking a little sleepy. So just feel free to let me know if anyone has something they want to ask. Can I add my own personal experience if I think it'll help the client? If I'm not a trained therapist, can I give advice in a session or a reading? If I'm a trained therapist, can I give them advice in a session or a reading? Okay, so this gets back to, what did you tell the person that you were going to do with them to begin with? If you're offering intuitive services, then they are coming to you expecting that you're going to get information psychically. They're not wanting your own personal input or advice most of the time. They want you to stay in a psychic space and be getting information that way. And if you don't know how to do that, like if you can't sit there for an hour without even needing them to speak and continuously get information, then you probably need more training or more practice. You should not be supplementing. If you're offering strictly an intuitive service where you say you're using your psychic abilities, then you should only be attempting to use your psychic abilities. Now, there's not going to be moments where you do happen to fill it in just because you don't know the difference, or you just kind of lose your psychic space and go into that. I occasionally find myself like, oh, wait a second, I'm just kind of giving some advice here. I'll feel it. I'll feel when like especially if it's something that I have a match with, or it's just like something like I read someone the other day, and she was talking about her, she had a question about her teenage son that was moving out of the house, and I have a son that had moved out of the house, and I could just feel myself wanting to leave my psychic space and just chat about it and give her my opinion. And I had like, it takes a lot of self-discipline. And then I said to her, you know what, this is not coming from a psychic place. I just went through the same thing. So I'm just going to step out of my psychic space and just tell you this. And I did that because it was almost like I was just so emotional about it. I just let that come out. And then I said, okay, that's enough. And sometimes people will appreciate that. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, well, that's fine, but I just want to hear your intuitive information. But I let her know I was like leaving one space and going into another. And I'll do that, but just very sparingly. Now, if you don't want to only offer intuitive services, if you want to offer a combination like coaching and intuition, or if you are a licensed therapist already and you want to be able to offer therapy and some intuition, or you're doing energy healing and some intuition. So these are like combining these different modalities. That is totally fine, as long as that's what you are advertising for yourself and people understand that it's going to be a combination. So that's no problem at all, but just let people know what you're doing. And don't, switch it around unless they know up front that that's what you're going to do. That's my advice, at least. Okay, medical health questions. This is another huge topic. What I suggest, a couple different things, is on your website to let people know that you are not a medical practitioner, if that's the case, if that's not what you're going to be doing with the people. And so that just like make that clear that you're not practicing medicine and you're not going to be providing medical advice. When you actually get with them, now a lot of times readers are looking at a person, they're looking at their body, they're looking at their energy field. And so we can look at people energetically, and sometimes we can look at health questions, and we can look at sometimes these things are just going to come up. Sometimes people have questions about them. So my approach has been to first remind the person I'm not a medical practitioner, and also that I always highly recommend that they get seen by a medical practitioner, a licensed medical practitioner. And I will sometimes intuitively, I'll get the sense that it's been a really long time since they saw someone. Sometimes I'll get a sense that they really do need, like they do have an issue and they need to see someone. So I don't want to just like avoid the issue, but I look at what we're doing is like helping to supplement what they already may, let's say they're already getting help from different medical professionals, but no one seems to know exactly what's going on. Maybe they are afraid to go to a doctor or something like that. So we can be there to help supplement, but we shouldn't think of ourselves as replacing unless, let's say they're already under care and they're not getting the answers. And in that case, it's supplementing anyway. So there's so much more I could say about this. I would just say, the other thing is you can miss things. We oftentimes when we're doing readings, we get bits and pieces of information, but we may miss something, especially if like it's something that would be really hard to talk about. And so to just let your client know too, like, okay, like, I'm seeing this here. But again, like I might be missing something. So, you could take what I'm seeing here, but also just make sure you get other input as well. Reading without permission. Is it okay to read anyone at any time? Should I look into questions my client asks about others not present? I would say, again, this is something that everyone has their own ideas about in terms of, is it okay to read people who haven't asked to be read? People so oftentimes have relationship questions and want to know about other people. And my opinion about it is, as long as they're doing this not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they're just seeking information about how to best deal with the person, how to handle their relationship, how to improve, how to understand what went wrong in a relationship. So they're trying to heal themselves in some way, have a better relationship. So as long as it's for reasons that are anything other than they want to hurt the person or take advantage of them, then I'm inclined to say, sure, it's okay. We're not going to we're not trying to influence the other person. We're not We want the best for the other person. So always looking at it that even though you tend to form a bond with your client and think of them oftentimes as just kind of natural inclination to think of your client as like the right person, or the person who's like, the right person in the relationship, and they're asking about someone else, and, maybe the other person has behaved wrong or something like that. Just understand that like we want as much wellness for the other person they're asking about as for them. And if at any point it becomes clear that our client has ulterior motives, or like motives to hurt the person they're asking about, then we should let them know like we're not comfortable with it, or it's not beneficial to do that. Because I have read people, it's almost every other reading like is about relationship readings, I would say, but every once in a while, it's very rare, but I've come across where like basically my client was stalking somebody else. And it became clear, not because they told me that, but because clairvoyantly I saw like the person they're asking about, like saying like, get away from me. I've already told you this, like it'll come up like, I've told you 1,000 times, I don't want you to contact me anymore. So if I get a sense of that, then like I know what we're doing at that time is no longer okay. Okay, so reading children. Reading the whole topic of reading children, we have to be super careful. So sometimes a younger person will ask for a reading. Sometimes a client will want their child to be read. So I would say overall, now the issues might be a little different if you're reading them in person versus online. These days, any kind of practitioner has to be careful about being alone in a room with a child. You could just get accused of things, of sexual misconduct or anything like that. It's really unfortunate, but there's a reason for that, and because that does happen. So you want to be really careful about being alone in a room with a minor. The other thing is that anything you tell a child, basically anything you tell someone, they may tell somebody else and their parents. And children are, if you see anything where you side with the children, like let's say you see that their parents are not making the best decisions or not treating them well, or they have a different opinion than their parent, and you support them in their opinion, the first thing they're going to do is go tell their parent. They're likely the first thing they're going to do is tell their parent exactly what you said, and use it to empower themselves. And parents will get very upset about that. Even if the parent wanted their children to be read, that can still happen. I've had, before I had a policy where I just most of the time wasn't going to read a child, I encountered that like basically every time. And, you can't tell a child or a minor to not tell their parents what you're saying, because that is emotionally, you don't want to tell anybody that they have to keep a secret. It's just too emotionally traumatic for someone to have to keep a secret, and that's not for you to say. So you have to understand that anything you tell someone, they could go tell someone else, and they may, a lot of times you're going to be recording a session and offering that recording these days, but anyone could be recording anything that you're saying. And so that does put more pressure on things. For sure. But so I would say either avoid reading children or let the parents know, like exactly like, well, find out how old the child is. Why does the parent want the child to get a reading? Maybe it's really the parent who has questions. They want to get understanding about their child. Maybe you could like look at the child as you read the parent. You meet with the parent one-on-one, and then you could do a reading and look into, what's happening with the child. If it does seem like it would be appropriate, like if they say, well, my child is like 15 years old or 16, and they're so into these topics and they really want to experience the reading, and, it'll be fine, let them know, well, this could still happen. We may end up talking about you and you might not like it. Let them know that. But the other thing is that I would say two things about if you do read the child, then you could have them together. Like you could have the parent on the phone too. If they're on the phone or both in person, they could be in the room together. That can present itself with its own challenges. But if you see something like negative, like I remember one time, the minor I was reading, he was maybe about 12 years old. And this was before I decided to have a policy where I wouldn't read children for the most part. But he was younger and he wanted to become a baseball player and was hoping to become a famous world-class baseball player. And he asked me to look to see if that would happen for him. And my sense was that like he was going to enjoy the game, but I didn't really like see that happening for him. But I in this case, like my overall approach is typically to be honest with people. But in this case, I didn't, you never want to like dash someone's hopes that like, no, like give it up. You're not going to be a famous baseball player. So, in that case, like there's ways to look to see like, okay, maybe I'm not even going to answer that question, but what could I look to see? Like, okay, well, I do see, and I have to be honest, right? So I'm not talking about making something up, but let me see like, okay, what will be his relationship to baseball? Well, I see you're always going to enjoy it. I'm avoiding the question of yes or no about being a famous baseball player. But I see you're always going to enjoy it. And I see there's actually going to be other things that you also are really interested in. Like I see like you have a love for science and it's going, I see like you getting really involved in like this aspect of science. So I've not had to say like, no, you're not going to be a famous baseball player, but I've introduced other possibilities as well. And again, this is all psychically, it's having to look for, ask yourselves or, wherever the source of your information is coming from, let me see like what are some positives that this person's going to experience in their life. But in one case, I was reading someone and I saw he was going to have serious issues with alcohol. And so again, I'm not going to blurt out, oh, I see you're going to like, your future is filled with alcoholism and you're going to have a really hard time. Like, I'm not going to say that to a kid, but instead to put it, and this is where getting a little creative, I'm not lying, I'm not misrepresenting things, but I'm putting it in terms of, all right, I see that there may be a couple challenges for you and you're going to have it where like people want to like, give you drinks or encourage you to drink. And this could be like a weak area for you. So you're going to have to be really careful about this. So, finding a way that where in the future, they might look back on what you said and, think twice about it. And it might actually help them without saying, well, give it up. Your life is just, you're going to be an alcoholic and, you don't want to do that. So this is where you can get creative and use your intuition to help you get creative with coming from the place intuitively. What if I believe my client is suicidal? All right. Well, First, the question is why do you believe that? Maybe you see it, like maybe they didn't tell you anything, but it comes up in the session. Maybe they do express it. This is where those of you that are social workers or psychologists and have had ethics training, or just nurses, doctors, again, there tends to be a protocol to follow if somebody is suicidal. Now, in terms of doing energy work and spiritual work, on the one hand, like there's this dichotomy. On the one hand, I would say that it is definitely worthwhile to look at what is happening with that person on a spiritual level, what's happening with them energetically. What is there an energy in their space that's like making them depressed? Is it like what is it that's going on that is making them like this? And sometimes it can be a foreign energy. Sometimes it's something they've struggled with for a long time. So looking to see with an open mind, don't do your reading from a perspective of oh, this is terrible. I have to report this. I have to stop them. I would say do your reading from a neutral space of let me see what's happening with this person. Like, who knows, maybe their spirit has really had enough. Maybe their spirit is just just be open, because you'll learn a lot from having that perspective. So that would be the attitude during the reading. Like, let me just be totally open to all possibilities. And if the person came to you and said, I'm thinking of killing myself, can you, take a look here at this? Or I'm, feeling like I want to, can you look to see what's going on? Try to put aside all your judgments, all of their training, and go into an intuitive space. Again, if that's what you're there to do, a reading, and be totally neutral and open to whatever is going to show itself. That being said, by the time you're done with your session, that's when I would say that the legalities and the psychological social work ethics should kick in. So even if you see like that their spirit is like pretty much like feeling like done, like they just don't want to do anymore, whatever it is. There may also be healing that could be done as well to shift. But let's say at the end, they are expressing still that they're suicidal, or you really got the sense like they are going to be doing it. Then that's when you would move to a checklist at the end of your session. And so does it turn out they have a specific plan? And now you're going to get some things intuitively, but I would say needing to at this point talk to them. Do they have a specific plan? Do they have the items to carry it out? So they say, yes, I'm going to take pills. Do they have the pills with them? And are they leaving the session saying that they're just going to proceed? If that's the case, then we really have a legal need to, or at least according to the ethics of professional organizations, that we do, if all these are affirmative, then we do need to take every step we possibly can to get them some help. Just knowing, though, that when you do that, they may not be happy about that. They may feel that you violated their confidence, and sometimes going to get them help could lead to their own incarceration in a mental health facility or hospital. There could be legal implications for them too. So it's not a light thing. So you really want to, if you in a session you see them taking their own life, but then they don't communicate these things, that can get like really tricky, as opposed to if they say, yes, I have a plan and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it tonight or whatever. But if it gets that specific with that plan, then I would say you should do everything you can to get in touch with someone close to them. Like what I would do would be to, well, for me, I have people sign up through my calendar, and I usually have like their phone number. Sometimes I have more information like their address. If you know where they live, like you could, if you couldn't find family members, like maybe look them up on Facebook or something where you could see their family members. And I would say that's always like who you want to get in touch with first. But if you can't, then as long as you know like the area that they live in, you could call like the local police and let them know. Of course, having an address is helpful. So just do everything in your power to try to find someone who could go and intervene for them. But just know that intervention is going to have implications. And none of this is easy. And none of this is like really straightforward. But I would never just, say, okay, well, they just want to die. So, I know they're going to do it. I'm just going to let them, I'm going to at least do everything I can to try to intervene regardless. And sometimes that might even mean like going against what you saw spiritually was the case, but you've just got to, do what you can do there.
Deborah, I
Yes.
think Casey had a question. How many people have channeled messages for loved ones? They didn't mean to do it. I believe she's talking about suicidal clients, and who does it belong to? Casey, do you want to elaborate on the question?
A little bit. Okay, as empaths, as empaths, we pick up other people's feelings all the time. Okay. And I have a technique to where we go in and we can ask them to go into their own little space, take a few deep breaths. I'm going to ask you what percentage of this energy that you are feeling is yours. Most of the time, if you ask them, 5 to 10% of it is theirs. They are such strong empaths that they pick up 75 to 90% of all the stuff they're feeling that's not even theirs. People need to learn to walk around several times a day and say, okay, all this energy that's mine, I'm sending it back to source for healing, especially as empaths,
Yes, definitely.
Because when you find out, well, 5% of everything you're feeling and wanting to kill yourself is yours, and another 95% of it is not yours, then you need to realize that, and you need to send it back to source for healing,
Yes, exactly. And that's why it is so valuable for people to come to people like yourself and other intuitives, and who can, look and see like what's going on. Like maybe someone else depressed, like they're channeling their energy, or maybe someone's like really angry at them and that's coming through, or maybe they have like a negative attachment, or maybe a lot of times I've found that people are at the end, that they're at the end of a cycle in their life. So like they're tired of how life is, and maybe a lot of things are wrapping up, and it can almost feel to them like there's nothing else. I've done everything, I've seen everything, I don't have any interest in any of this anymore. But so they're at the end of a cycle, but what they don't realize is there's like a whole new cycle with like new people and interests and activities and a whole different way of life that could be waiting there. So there tends to be these different things, and you just want to, stay present and see what is the case with the person. I mean, sometimes it could be too that maybe they are about to die and they're having like a precognitive sense of it as well. So there's so many different things that can be going on. And this is where, as intuitives, we can really help. And instead of going straight to like, oh, well, you must have, some kind of like imbalance, which that might be, they might have a chemical imbalance or hormonal imbalance. That might be the case too. But we have other possibilities other than, a very limited lists. So that's why I say, like, be totally open, do the work that you're going to do. But then at the end, if it seems like the person isn't really expressing like, oh yeah, you've given me like, a whole new look on things, but, just check to go through this checklist can help out. Okay, thank you for that comment. So what if my client discloses harm or a threat of harm to someone else? Again, I would say some of these same guidelines as before. Do they have a specific plan? Do they have the items to carry it out? Are they leaving the session saying they will proceed? So we need to know that. And maybe if you leave a session like feeling like the person is going to harm someone else, then you may want to notify the authorities. And my sister, I have a twin sister who does readings, and she had this happen where a longtime client who came in repeatedly, he would always ask about this one guy who a former business associate, he was really mad about. And my sister started to see that he wanted to like hurt the guy. And she asked him straight out, and he said, yeah, like I want to kill him. And he was planning on killing him. And she called me and she was like, what should I do? Because like, he would be so mad if I like contacted the authorities. And I was like, you've seen the plan, he's verified it, he's saying he's going to like do it this week. Like you have to, this might be saving the guy's life. And so she contacted the police. This was in Santa Barbara, California. And she contacted the police and they went over, and sure enough, like he had the means to do it, or there was evidence that he was planning it. And he did end up like going to jail. It was a really like scary situation for her because she was like really worried he was going to be so angry. And I think he had warrants and stuff for other things as well. Not an easy situation, but when we're dealing with people, like this is a thing you have to be aware of, that, it's dealing with people regardless of whatever the service you're providing. People are challenging, and there's going to be these things from time to time. Fortunately, they're rare. They're not often at all. What if my client has threatened to harm me, or I get a creepy vibe? Just like I said at the start of this, you do not have to continue a session if you feel threatened in any way. Just find a reason to end it. You don't have to tell them that they're scaring you. You could just say, you know what, I'm suddenly not feeling well. I have to go. I mean, especially I'll talk in a little bit, like if you're in person, but regardless, like take yourself out of the reading or the situation, whether you're online or in person. You don't need to tell them that the reason at this point, whatever you have to say to protect yourself, the policy of always having to be honest, which I would say would apply, in 99% of the cases. If you're being threatened, then just say whatever you have to do to get yourself in a safe place. And then you could just, give the person, refer them out, refer them to a professional. Of course, you don't want to just like, send them to your friend who's a psychic if they're, scaring you, but just let them know that it's not going to work for it. Maybe just say like, I've read you too much already, or just like I have issues, you remind me of my father and I have issues with my father. So just, end the session there. And then beyond that, however you would handle it, if anyone you meet is giving you a creepy vibe, we could go into that, but we'd be getting off topic. Okay. So then let me just see. Okay, so does anyone want to ask any questions at this point before we continue on? Now we're going to be getting to the business side of things, but just anything that we've talked about so far. And if you want to just put it in the chat, and then Theon can look at that. I will just continue unless she interrupts me here. So should I go through training to become a light worker? Does taking a few classes mean I'm ready to start a practice? When should I stop taking classes, and why is it important to get readings myself from time to time? So my attitude, and this would be no matter what type of professional you are, we always should continue to learn ourselves, to learn. I think it's very useful to learn new approaches. Now, sometimes learning new approaches can temporarily kind of mess with the current approaches that you have that work well for you. So I've found, like with myself and other people, I work a lot with like people that are already psychics and know one modality, but want to learn, like, say, develop their visual clairvoyance more. And sometimes for a little bit, there will be like kind of a, they'll notice like they're not as sharp with their modality when they start to introduce new modalities, but then it'll even out. And then usually like, then they'll be like, oh, wow, I'm now going like off the charts here with what I'm doing. But it took a little bit to get things sorted out, like things will feel kind of discombobulated. But, I think there's a balance, because there's definitely people that never feel like they're enough. And so, they're perpetual students, not just because they love to learn and they're just so obsessed with all this stuff, but also because they just feel like I've got to make myself perfect. And that can really get out of balance. So, there's times to just practice, and you don't have to learn anything more because you want to really like practice what you've learned so far and integrate it. And then there's other times where, yes, it's great to like amp up what you're already doing and see if there's, more you could be doing as well. Does taking a few classes mean I'm ready to start a practice? Well, everyone is different. I've had in my 12-week clairvoyant class, I would say, like, if someone didn't really practice very much, then no, they're not going to be ready after a 12-week class, or even 24 weeks if they're not practicing. But I've had some students who are practicing like nonstop. Outside of class, they're taking advantage of group readings. They're doing many readings a week, like Theon is someone like that. So just like get continuously practicing. So it's not really how long you're taking a class or that you started 6 months ago. If you started 6 months ago and you've done now, let's say 200 readings, even 100 readings, then you're going to be really far along. So it's really the amount of practice that you put in and the amount of time that you spend. And you're going to know that you are ready to go professional, meaning to start charge, after you do enough sessions and people verbalize to you like, oh, I feel like I should pay you something, like I got so much out of this. And also after you get so much practice and you start to feel like, this is like, I already am getting proficient here. And this is starting to feel a little bit like work to me. Like I just spent a lot of time with this person and they got a lot out of it. And this was time that took away from me actually working, or it took away from time from, my family or whatever. You're going to start to get that sense that you gave a lot. It went really well. They're giving you positive feedback and they want to pay. Like people will start to feel like, oh, I feel so bad because you just spent all this time with me and I got so much out of it. And so when those elements come together, that's when you're ready. Don't just do like practice for 10 sessions and then be like, oh, I want some money and I see other people making money from it, so I'm going to do that. Get as many practice sessions as you can under your belt and then continue to practice. As I would say, that's the other thing is if you want to have a thriving business, but when you start off, like unless you're someone who is extremely social, like people with really social personalities who have a big social network, it's easier for them than like someone who doesn't like know a ton of people. But But so initially you may not have all that many people coming to you. So keep practicing, even if you have you start off with 2 or 3 paying clients, continue to offer free readings to whoever will take it. So you keep getting that experience built up. And every time you do a reading or a session or a healing session with someone, you're moving the energy, and it's like you're sending vibes out. This is getting into the concept of manifesting. But when you do something that you love and you're excited about and you're engaged in that energy, it goes out there, and then others can find you, regardless of whatever your marketing materials are. So that's what I would recommend, is continue to take advantage of all practice opportunities, even once you start to charge, until you get to the point where you're saying, oh, I don't have time for these practice opportunities because either, I'm doing paid readings, or I need to work. I need to do my paid readings over here and also do other work to bring in income.
Deborah just had a question. She said, for Deborah and Than, what is your view on saying before a reading, this reading is for entertainment purposes only, as a disclosure, as many readers seem to do?
I hate that. I will never do that.
Yeah.
I will never do that, because I'm not doing the reading to entertain people. Maybe occasionally my readings might make something I say might make someone laugh, but that's so degrading. And so I would not do that at all. And I think it just makes what we're doing, not a serious thing. So, I would rather have another, kind of disclaimer, or, not have a disclaimer, but, yeah. And, when they say that, what are they protecting themselves from? Again, I think the areas we have to be careful is to be accused of practicing medicine. And of course, if you're a practitioner of anything, anyone could sue you if they want to. So that's where, you could either protect yourself by, if you register as a LLC, limited liability corporation, then if you get sued, it would be suing the corporation and not yourself. You could get insurance, and insurance is different state by state. So people oftentimes ask me if I can recommend an insurance company, but, so many practitioners therapists, psychologists have insurance. So looking under that kind of insurance would help. Again, I've never really had any issues, and that's because of what I'll talk about in just a couple slides later about giving people their money back. And just these practices of letting people know in advance what you're going to charge them. If someone voices displeasure, giving their money back, halfway through a session, being clear about your refund policy. If someone cancels with me before a reading, they get a refund. Even if they are going to cancel 5 minutes before a reading, they still get a full refund. And you know what? I might cancel with them right before a reading. And I put that on my website, if you need to cancel, then cancel. So if you do all these practices where you make it so money isn't an issue, then you're a lot less likely to, get into trouble. Now, that's not to say that every once in a while there couldn't be just some crazy person out there, who's gonna come up with whatever, but again, there's no way to really avoid that. That can happen just walking down the street, someone jumps in front of your car. I don't even like to have to talk about these things because it's so unpleasant, but, in that case, we're really a victim of something. So a disclaimer, this is for entertainment purposes, I just don't see how that's going to really, help. Okay, so energy maintenance, making sure that you are always checking yourself. Just, are you doing your meditations? Are you making sure that you're in a good state? And if you're not, then you might need to take a break and do whatever you need to do for yourself. Okay, marketing and ethical promotion. I don't have a lot of experience, so can I embellish my qualifications? What if I am not a self-promoter? How do I market myself? And how can I market and promote myself ethically? So, oh, I'm sorry, my electricity just went off, and I don't know if it went off in my whole house. So I don't know if you could see me right now. That was very weird. You know what? Hang on just a second. I'm going to just see if my husband's around. Oh, okay, it came back on. All right. So be honest, but you know, this is really a balance, because I've seen it both ways. You know, you don't have to say on your website, if you're just starting off, you can say positive things about yourself without lying about them. You can say things without, saying that, so-and-so, I'm the best psychic in the world, or I'm always right, or I have 100% accuracy. No one doing psychic work has 100% accuracy. There's been lots of research done on this, and even like people, particularly within remote viewing, and even the best psychics, the best remote viewers, the best mediums, they misinterpret things, they miss things, they distort things, and sometimes they're just off. There's many reasons for being off, but we all are off sometimes. So we cannot say, we have 100% accuracy. Now, some people, and probably not so much people that are reading other people, but there are some intuitive practitioners who keep stats on themselves. And, if that's the case, then you could say something about that. But there's ways to just present who you are in a way that's positive, but is not making things up. And I would suggest, like, when you write a bio, like, show it to a few people. In fact, I love these topics. So, like, if you wrote a bio and you were like, I need someone to look at this bio, I'd be happy to look at your bio. I can't tell you how many times people underrepresent themselves. Like, it tends to be for newer intuitives, especially like if they've trained with other people. I mean, I think it's great to acknowledge your teachers and acknowledge, like, where you learned, but that doesn't have to be the very first thing you say about yourself. Like, that could be at the end of your bio, or it could be, further down. And a lot of times, people will, like, the whole bio is about everyone else that they trained with and doesn't even say anything about themselves. So, just balance it out. And then the other thing is, don't leave out the other things that you do. Like, this is a tendency for intuitives to, like, only want to talk about, like, what they think relates to being intuitive. And so often, like, I've known nurses. I have a friend who's a longtime nurse practitioner, and I said, why don't you have it in your bio that you're a nurse practitioner? And she was like, well, what does that have to do with this? And I can't tell you how many times people have come to me and they said, I'm coming to you because you were a social worker, or you have a degree in social work. Or I know I feel like I can trust you more because you have a professional background. If you're an engineer, whatever you are, put that down. Because people want to know that you're not just flaky, or if you're an engineer or have that background and they're an engineer, that they're going to think that's really cool, and they're going to want to come and talk to you. So, do not leave that out. Have your education there, and have, everything you've already worked for is relevant. So, you could put that in there. And then, ask clients to write you reviews. Don't have your friends just make them up. Have honest reviews. And it can be very hard. I still have a hard time asking people, will you write a review if I don't just naturally have them there. There's a lot of programs online for your website. And if you're going to go into this work, especially as a private practitioner, you're going to need a website. And there's a lot of apps now that are testimonial apps, and they make it really easy to collect reviews. And it's much easier sometimes just saying like, oh, here's a link. Would you just fill this out here for me? Or if you have like an auto scheduling calendar, you can set it up where you have that link there, and it just automatically, they get sent a notice after they meet with you, like, did you enjoy your session? Please fill this out. And then you can use that to, like underneath your bio, have those reviews. Okay, so we addressed it would be lying if you said you're 100% accurate. And I'll tell people, like, I think the ethical thing to do is people should understand you are sometimes wrong, and they need to know that the way I look at it is, I've been doing this for a while. I have a lot of positive feedback. And I know that I can get insights for people that are going to make a difference in their life. But I can't say that I'm not going to sometimes be wrong. And it's really important that people know that, because we're not here to program people or to give their own power away. And so we need to give people a realistic view. And we don't want to read someone that just like thinks that every single thing we say, like that it's infallible, because that's not the case. And so I'd say, putting that on your website as well in a way that doesn't cancel out that you can do a good job, but that's important that they know that. And I think that can also help, for legal purposes too. How do I know when I'm ready to start charging? We already talked about that. How do I know how much to charge? This is a tough one. I would say there's a couple different factors. So there's one, what will the market bear? And there is such a wide range of what people charge. There are people that will charge, $25 for a reading when they first start out. Others might charge $75 when they're first starting out. But there are some readers like Sonia Coquette, who is a longtime author and intuitive. She charges, the last time I looked, it was like $700 for a 30-minute reading. And she is booked a lot. I know people who've received readings from her. And when I'm always like, oh, tell me, how was it? And they're like, yeah, it was good. I was, pleased with the results. So that sounds like a lot of money. And, when we start to talk about money, we all have different views of things, and a lot of money and a lot of it depends on our background. For this shirt I'm wearing, this shirt costs $70. I'm 54 years old, and it was only until a couple years ago that I would even let myself buy a shirt occasionally. Not all my shirts are $70. Usually I'm like looking for the bargains at $10 or $12 at Walmart. But it was only a couple years ago that I would even let myself consider to buy a single shirt that costs $70. But when I used to I used to work in Malibu for a short time, Malibu, California. And, there's so many celebrities there. And I would go into stores and there would be like, dresses for $2,000, $3,000. And some people aren't even like, aren't even giving it a second thought. So it really depends like what we're used to. And so someone that's used to making a lot of money already, or just coming from money, it may not be a big deal at all if they're going to start off doing readings at $300 an hour. For me, that feels like too much. And so I'm good at $275 an hour right now after doing readings for many years. But even that's a lot. Like, I still think that's a lot. And I have brought my prices up at different times because people were like, you could be charging more. And I have brought my prices up, and I found it really interesting that as soon as I did that, I had clients booking at those higher prices. However, what I found was I was just feeling like too much pressure at those higher prices. So I just paid attention to how I felt. And then I brought my price to a place that still feels high, but is working for me. And so that's what I would recommend for anyone just starting off, is to feel your way into it. Like, go into your heart center, go into your solar plexus, and give yourself a number. Just tune in and say, okay, like, and imagine it like someone is sending you $80 for a reading. Like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel happy? Do you feel like, oh gosh, this is really a great match for what I just did? Or do you feel like, oh, that like there's a lot of other things I could be doing at that amount? Or do you feel like, oh gosh, I would feel so much pressure to do well, I think I better like go down to $60. How does that feel? So you feel your way into it. There's no right or wrong. And, you'll find that people will, if sometimes the more you charge, or at least if you're charging, you're going to get people that are more serious about, like, not being there to play test the psychic, but who are more, literally, they're invested in getting something out of the session. So since I went from charging higher, well, I'll just say even charging, like the people I used to get a much wider assortment of people and people that were more kind of problematic when I wasn't charging at all compared to when I started to charge. At least the skeptics, most of the hardcore skeptics went away because they're not willing to spend money, for their entertainment, to go and torture you for a little bit. Okay, should I charge them after the session or before? I made things way easy on myself. Technology is so helpful. And so I found that by having an auto booking calendar, having people see my prices, because I just feel I have a hard time personally. I don't like having to deal with the financial aspects of things or discussing pricing with people. So I like to be able to say, go to my website, you'll see my prices there. If you want to book with me, it's easy to find my booking calendar. It does that automatically. And my calendar is set so that they have to pay at the time, I think it's set right now, at the time they book the session, they have to pay. Some calendars, I use a program called VCITA, and VCITA, and it has like a lot of options with the capabilities. Other booking calendars have less options, but you can change those options around. But I like to have it where at the time they book, they pay. Or you might be able to have a setting where they have to pay like within 48 hours of the session. And that way you don't have to like worry, like, are they going to pay after? Because what will happen, even if someone loves their session, their need is greater before. And what can happen is after a session, they may just find other things now that they want to spend their money on. There's something, especially if they don't have a lot of money, or it's not as pressing now because they got what they wanted. So just to save like extra energy and have it all clear and clean, I like to have people pay in advance. And that's very rarely ever been a problem. every once in a while, there might be someone who says, I can't do it. I want to get booked with you, but I can't afford to pay at the time I'm booking. And then we could make other arrangements. But there's so many tools to have these things done automatically. And some of this that I know if you're just exclusively working with Theon, then she's going to be helping take care of some of these aspects for you. And it's not hard to get things set up, but it may feel like a lot, let's say, and apart from whatever you're doing with Theon, you're going to also have your own business, getting your website and then finding the booking calendar and the payment portal, whether it's PayPal or Stripe or Venmo, getting those things set up. The more, and they're not hard, it's just a lot to do. So it is really nice if you have someone who's going to take care of all that, and then you could just, show up and do your sessions. That's a great benefit for sure. But these technologies do cut down on the energy and time involved. And I also like, this is something else I would look out for, which again, it might help if you're working with Theon's business. But what used to happen for me is, and now that, this is going back like 25 years ago, but people would call me, or they would say, will you call me? Because I want to talk to you about setting up a session. So I would call them, or they'd call me, and then they usually are trying to get you to do a reading right when they call you, like even though they're calling to set up a session, but they're like, can I ask you a quick question? Or do you think I really need a reading? Or let me tell you, my life story here. And initially that was okay. But then when you have several people a week doing that, like I was finding that I was spending as much time and energy just in those phone calls to get people set up. And then I was also finding that I was like being energetically pulled in their direction, or thinking about them too much before the session. And I had too much information up front. It was just really messy. So I found now that like technology helps it. So like, I don't want to have that contact until we get to the session. And then when we get to the session, they could have my 100% attention and everything, but I'm going to try to like not get front loaded or not like know too much about them, especially if we've never worked together before. I don't want all that extra noise there. And I'm going to try to have it very energetically clean before and after. That's the goal, is not to have energetic ties, except, during the session. And that's what's made it possible to continue to do this work for so many years.
Oh, Deborah, Daytona had a question. She said, what if people want to make a personal payment instead of what's suggested? And Daytona, do you want to elaborate on that? Like I asked her if she meant a tip, but she's saying no.
Hello. This conversation is getting meaty, no potatoes. Okay. I'm so digging it and appreciate the review and the insight so much. Thank you so much. My question was, it just popped in my head because doing online work, it's one of those things to where they'll be like, I was given this like little test after I had did my work and stuff, for review. And one of the questions that came up as far as now when someone, when a student asks you, and they want to pay you outside of what's already offered, we're not allowed to take those payments, because that could that's leading into like treading waters of like ethics of some sort, that what's already suggested as far as the payments, like taking any payment outside of what's already offered, we're not allowed to. We have to report it.
Well, okay, so I think there's two. Well, one would be like if they're just going to give you, okay, I'll answer this in two ways. Like one way, which I don't think you're asking about, but would be like if they want to give you, like say they paid a set price in advance, but then maybe they want to give you a tip. And so if you're just like working one-on-one with them, you could have things on your website listed where you could say like want to leave a tip, or some programs might let for people to go back in and leave a tip or an extra donation, like if they want to give you more. But if you're working for someone else, and then you're not supposed to, different employers will have different restrictions. So some employers might be like, you have to, they have to pay through the system. They can't go to you outside of the system. Is that what you're referring to more so?
Yes, I was referring to the second option that you had just summarized. It's definitely, I don't know, I just was just nudged, it brought up something that I was already going through, so I just decided to ask. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. So that will come up with different employers. And so ethically, you have to decide if what your employer, which could be, a website that you're working through or a store that you're working through, they're going to have rules. Those rules can get to be challenging sometimes. Sometimes the rules will be that if the person wants to book with you again, they have to book through the employer that they came in through, or the site that they came in through. Like it's not okay to just give them your business card and say, hey, if you want a reading in the future, you don't have to go through this website, just contact me directly. So that would be one thing. Or like, oh, you want to give me a tip? Okay, here's my own website, even though, they book through that service. Ethically, if you have an agreement with someone, then you should follow that agreement as long as that's working for you. So there's pros and cons. So if your employer says they have to, if they want to give you a tip, it has to come through our system, or we don't allow tips, and that's what you have to do. If your employer says if someone booked through here once, then you need to, have them book through us again, like indefinitely. If you agreed to that, they're giving you benefits. And then if you agree to that, then you have to follow that. Now, in the past, like I worked for a lot of different people, like stores and stuff starting off early on. And a lot of times these things weren't communicated clearly. And then, so I would give my business card. I went to this one, this woman had like this mansion, and she was having different readers read one night. And I was handing out my business cards after, like, I maybe did like, I don't know, 8 readings during several hours. And I was giving people my business cards. And like for the last one, like the lady running things burst through my door, and she was like, I caught you. You gave them your business card. And I was like, what are you talking about? Of course I did, and I was there for one night. And she was like, you are being so unethical and so dishonest. These are my people and you shouldn't have done that. Well, she never told me not to do that. And I was just there for one night. So the thing is that if you work for someone, you need to find out what their rules are. It's if they don't tell you, then you need to ask and then follow them. And if it to me, if I see someone like through a business, like let's say a couple times, and then I leave that business, it does kind of feel like, oh gosh, well, I've got like this close connection now with this client. And it seems like if that person really wants to see me after I'm not with them anymore, like I don't know. I've always felt like, to me, it feels like a third party shouldn't stand in the way if me and the client can't see each other, just because I used to work for these people. That's one of those tricky situations. So I would just be really clear about what's the policy when you're with them and what's the policy later. And, just as kind of a side note, I'd say since things change, right? Like it may be perfect to work for a certain employer for a while and then not so much anymore. Some people may decide like, okay, I'm going to be with them for the next 20 years. It's like everything's taken care of. I don't have to worry about the business end. But for some people, they're going to want to go on their own. If you can, just let people know. Well, see, again, it's like this could be seen as unethical. Is it unethical to just let people know your real name? And in the future, if you're not with that business, 5 years from now, they'll be able to find you because they knew your name. That's maybe a workaround. But you would have to just really find out what the parameters are. And it's a tough one for sure, because sometimes what other employers want for ourselves doesn't really feel right for us or our clients, but we have to respect that. And there are, if you sign a contract, you do want to just know if you're signing something, what the parameters are and how restrictive is it going to be into the future. I'd say like time matters, because for me, I don't mind if something's restrictive in the moment, but if it's going to be like restrict what I feel like I can do, like for the rest of my life, or for the next 10 years, like when I went to the Berkeley Psychic Institute, and, again, this was like 27, 28 years ago, I had to sign a contract. They called it a spiritual agreement, but I had to sign something where I agreed I wouldn't talk or write about the methods I was learning for a period of 7 years. And I did end up writing about those methods, but I waited 7 years. And it felt, at times like rather ominous. I understood why they did that. But at the same time, I've grown to now understand law, and the copyright law and trademark law says that you cannot trademark a process. You cannot trademark an instruction is a process. So you could trademark the written form, but you can't. So for example, like what I'm talking about today, like you couldn't like just take my slides or the outline and just like publish it as your own. But you could take notes, or you could use what you had in your head and put it in any format you wanted. And the law says that you can, recycle it. Anything you learn, you can pass on to other people. And a lot of people don't realize that, but that law was established because pretty much if people could like trademark a process, then it would stop human advancement and human evolution. And that was recognized, and I think rightly so. So just getting back to your question, I kind of diverged there. But you do want to just look over anything you're signing and look at the implications out into the future. Okay, so then should I give a refund when a client cancels a session? Again, if it's in advance, I would say go for it, even if it's going to inconvenience you. Some people are going to have different opinions about that, but I'm always going for, this gets into like, how do I protect myself? And one way to protect myself is to at least try to avoid conflicts. And most conflicts will arise around financial situations. At the same time, you do want to respect yourself. I had one situation where I started to read a client and a new client. And at the beginning of the reading, I had this very strong sense that she was not going to like what I had to say. And I told her that. I said, something tells me that you are not going to like what I'm going to be saying. And I want to just like let you know that, to give you a chance to, end this session. And she was like, no, I'm open to anything. And so we started to look at a relationship that she wanted to know about. And I mean, she called it a relationship. I wouldn't really call it that, but, it was more like she had sex with a guy once. And that was like almost a year ago. And she was really obsessed with him. And this all came out during the reading. And it didn't look like they were going to be getting together. But I gave her extra time. We went for almost 2 hours. And then she ended up contacting PayPal and saying that she didn't get a reading from me after I spent 2 hours with her. So that was a situation where and I kind of got the sense that she does this with psychics. Now, this isn't a lot of people, but there are some people who would do this. So in that case, I fought that. But I was too late because I missed my notices went to my spam folder and I didn't like follow through, and PayPal actually gave her the refund because I wasn't on top of I had the evidence too. I had the recording that went for 2 hours. I had like our email communications, but I was too like past the deadline to fight it. But I did fight it because if I hadn't fought it, I was feeling like I was really being taken advantage of. And I had given her my time and I had given her that warning in advance that she wasn't going to like what I was saying. So other times I would say, just give back the money, especially if you get started in a session. I think I have it here. Oh, yeah. What happens when I need to stop in the middle of the reading? You could either just say, you know what, I'll give you a full refund. Like if you want to stop it because they're, talking too much or getting angry or being obnoxious in some way, or you just feel stuck, like you just feel like, this is not going well, give them a full refund. Or if you went for a certain time, you might be like, you know what, we've been going this long. I did answer these questions. Would you, why don't we stop here and, I'll give you half your money back. So just, you try not to have people like leave angry and be disgruntled about the money. If that's the case, it's much better to give them their money back for that than like face it, they're going to be like really mad and want to sue you or something like that. I have rarely, like out of the thousands of people I've read, I've probably like over all these years, like given a total of, I don't think it's even been 10 refunds after all these years. So it doesn't happen a lot. But then, I'd rather like not have that ongoing stress. That's the stress and the energy, right? So if someone's mad, that whatever, give them their money back, let them feel like they won, their side of whatever. And then you're going to have less to contend with energetically. But again, if you feel like you've really been taken advantage of, that feeling is something that can pursue and, make you feel resentment and and contribute to burnout. And so you have to be balanced with it. I'm not going to say you should always, under any circumstance, do that. I'm just going to move on here. I know we're getting late. Let's see how many more slides we have here. Okay, just let's say we'll go for 5 more minutes and I'll just race through these. So what do I do if I'm not bringing in enough money with my sessions? What do I do if I'm feeling burnt out, not my best, but I need money? Well, I would ask you, what do you do anytime you need money? You should not be relying, you should not use your readings as the only source of income until it becomes clear that they really can be your only source of income. And in that case, if they start to slow down, will you be okay? If not, then you should be doing other work until you can have them support you. And even then, a lot of people, myself included, I cannot do that many readings every day or during the week. And some intuitives can do more sessions consistently than others. But many cannot do like hour after hour. And so I would say, like, really look at whether or not it's really going to work for you to try to solely rely on your readings, because it could put so much pressure on your readings and on you, and then put you in compromising situations. So why not have a backup way of having income, or, part-time job or whatever you have to do to not put that pressure on your reading space? That would be my recommendation. Over the years, I noticed with myself, and this is so true with just about anybody that I know, is what will happen is our flow of clients oftentimes will match our energy level. And so if you start to get burnt out and tired, the clients will stop. Even if your mind is saying, I need to book more, I need to market, I need to keep my calendar open. Even if you are saying that with your mind, but your feeling is, I'm tired and burnt out and I need a break, the universe will respond to what you're really needing. And I've seen that so many times in reading people who are what, I had so many people and now they're not here. And then looking at it, it's well, you look exhausted and you have no life force at the moment. And so you got to take that time for yourself. And that can be really hard if you're depending on them financially. Let's see here. Is it safe to go to a client's home to do work? Be really careful with that. I would say it may not be safe. It depends on how well you know the person. If you already have been reading them for a long time, if you know about their background and stuff. But someone who just calls you and says, will you come over? Even I used to have the rule, if it was a male, I wouldn't just go to their house. But then I started to realize okay, well, I have had a couple circumstances where I read women that were just psychotic. And I was reading one woman at a psychic fair and she just started screaming and cursing at me, she was putting curses on me. And it's what if I went to her house? I had a situation where I had read a woman a couple times, and she wanted me to read her and her boyfriend, and they lived in Los Angeles, and I was going to be in Los Angeles. And they said, well, would you come over and do a couples reading with us? And I said, sure. So I went to their house. And what I didn't realize was they were having relationship difficulties because he was being abusive to her. And during the reading, they were yeah, tell us anything. You could say anything. And so during the reading, I saw they weren't going to, things weren't working out very well with them. And there was all this conflict and it didn't look like it was going to go really well. And gosh, that was a pretty awkward situation to be telling them that, but to be telling them that together and then to be in their space. And there was this very threatening vibe from him. He was not happy. And at that, he started sending me, I got out of there as soon as I can. I was I feel safe in terms of my female client is totally harmless, but she's not in power here in this house. She's not in charge of the house. So you never know who else is there. And when you're in a reading space, your eyes are closed half the time or most of the time. You're so focused, you don't know what's going on around you. So, not to scare people, but there's just a lot of different dangers. I would say you're better off bringing someone with you if you are going to go to their house. The thing is, when you go to someone's house, you're in their energy, and there's a whole bunch of different energies that are in that space, and it's just not such a good idea. With your own house, you're controlling the energy more. And now I really am talking about energy dynamics here. So it's easier to do it in your own house, but then they know where you live. And again, you don't know what they're going to do. So I'd say if they're going to come to your house, it's better if you have someone else in the house with you, and you just have to be really careful. And so it's really nice these days that so many of our readings can be done at a distance or online. And I went from exclusively in person to exclusively online and on the phone. And a lot of these issues just don't have anymore. Just gonna see if there's anything else. You have to look out for clients becoming dependent on you. And again, this will oftentimes, it can go too far. If a client wants to schedule with you, how often should you let someone schedule with you? Well, as I said earlier, sometimes someone has like 30 questions and you're only going to get to like a third of those in the reading. So if that's the case, there's nothing wrong with saying like, oh, let's get together in a week and finish your questions, or in a few weeks. Personally, I like to have time in between. I want them to process what we talked about. I want like life to just kind of happen so they could see like how things unfold. So unless there was a lot of things we didn't get to, I will typically recommend that a client wait like at least a few months. I used to have a policy that they had to wait 6 months because, again, I didn't want them to become dependent, and I also didn't want that energetic connection there. I want them to like be empowered and take the information themselves. That's kind of excessive to say like, you can't, meet with me for another 6 months. But, I would just say, be careful. It's like, if I would say the defining thing would be, are you looking at the same thing you looked at a week ago? Are you talking about the same thing? If you're just hearing yourself repeat yourself, then it's probably too much. And you could just be honest with them. And now sometimes they're coming because they're highly anxious, and it just makes them feel better. And, if that's the case and you both understand that's why you're meeting, that's okay. But if you get too saturated and knowing them too much, at least for those of you doing intuitive readings, you're not going to really be able to stay in your intuitive space if you know their story and know what you saw before. So just, be careful with that. And again, this is complete opposite advice that someone would give you, like a marketing professional, right? They would say they want your client to become dependent on you, but we're talking about ethical and healthy practices. And, I know I'm extreme as far as, saying have as much time as possible. Not everyone's going to agree with that, but healthy boundaries. What to do if a client thinks I'm telepathically communicating with them when I'm not? Well, just a couple of things here about that. As someone who has books out there, I will sometimes have people write to me and say that I've been sending them thoughts. Sometimes they think I'm sending them helpful thoughts. Sometimes on rare occasion, they've thought like I was messing with them when I had never heard of them before. I didn't know them. Occasionally, this has maybe just happened a couple of times with like clients or students. And I just had to explain to them, I haven't been thinking of you. That's not me, like whatever. Like, I don't want to say that they're not having some kind of maybe intuitive experience, like they might be having a mental breakdown. Or one thing that happens is if they're really psychic, and so say like someone's really psychic and they're thinking of me, they might tune into me and maybe they could get communication that way. Like maybe I would be saying something to them. Maybe a part of me does come to them in a dream or something, but I'm not conscious of it. I'm not trying to connect with people unless I'm, I have a reason to, and I'm not going to be trying to connect with clients or students or readers of my books. So, but I'm not going to say that people can't just by, if I think of Theon, I might just like, oh, what's Theon doing with her business? Or is she going to be in class tomorrow? If I start to think about her, maybe like I might get a message or I might get some kind of impression. And that's not because she's trying to make that happen, but it's because I'm psychic and she's psychic. And I think a lot of times, that's what happens. Or with people that they do misinterpret, whatever they're experiencing. And so just letting people know, don't say like you have a mental problem, but, explain why it might be happening, but assure them that you have not been thinking about them. You don't know them. This is really important. I think it's really essential to establish these boundaries. And after the session is over, it's over. Unless there was something that you got and forgot to tell them during the session, I really at all times try to avoid saying like, oh, well, if I think of something else, I'll let you know. And a lot of times clients will say that, well, if you think of anything else about me, let me know. And I'll say like, right then, well, I typically don't do that, but, again, wait a few months and we can book again, something like that. But as a general practice, I would be really firm that you don't answer questions in between sessions, because that's just like asking for an energetic, to things to get very energetically messy. Theon, how are we doing? Because it is getting late. I'm totally fine, but I want to respect people's time here.
I think we're doing good. There was a few people that had to drop off just because it was getting late for them. But it's funny is a lot of the ISC students are here. Yeah, we always love to hear all of this. So yeah, if everybody is okay with keeping going, is everybody okay?
Yeah, people can totally feel free to hang up at any time. We won't be insulted, but we're recording this, so you can tune in later. I know my students are used to like these marathon sessions, so but this is a long time to sit here and not have like discussion really. Okay, but we are almost done here. Power dynamics and sexual inappropriateness. This is a difficult topic because what if two people are mutually attracted to each other? If there's mutual attraction and let's say you just meet the person and you're a reader and you're reading them, it's a challenging situation. What I would say, and it depends. I put power dynamics up here with sexual inappropriateness. And you could kind of think of it like sexual harassment policies. There's a difference between someone walking up to someone else on the street and saying like, hey, you're attractive, or, you look like someone I'd like to get to know. Can we go out? That's very different than if that's your boss and you're working for them, or if that's your therapist. So it depends like what position we're coming from. Are we both students together? Are we both practitioners? What is the definition of client and the definition of practitioner? But overall, what I would say is that you have to be really aware of your own feelings during a session with a client. And if at the end of the session you feel like, oh, this is someone that I think I might want to date, then I would say you need to be really clear right at that point that if that's where you want to take it, then get out of your practitioner role. And they may feel the same way. And if they do, they may be fine. Like if you contacted them and said, I just really liked you, and I'm just wondering, would you want to go out with me? But I would not do any more readings for you. I'm not talking to you as a practitioner anymore, and being like really clear about that. The tricky thing is if they like you back, they might be fine with that. If they don't, like it might feel weird to them and disturbing. So it could be, either one. They might, even if they reject you, it's still, it's going to be embarrassing to you. But I would just say, be really clear about your intentions and separate out that role. And just know, like, if you're going to go there, then now they're not going to be your client anymore. Let's see, what else can I say about that? If that's the case, then because you were the one in more of a powerful position as the practitioner, then it's just really super important for you to be clear. And this is where people get into problems, because I've seen it where that person will get in touch with them, or the client will get in touch with them, and they'll start emailing or texting. But the practitioner, and this would include like the practitioner, or in the case of like a teacher or a facilitator, they're getting in touch with the client, and the client doesn't really understand, like the boundaries are fuzzy. Like, in what capacity are they talking to me right now? And I've seen it where the practitioner, even if they're like, even when they are more clear and saying like, oh, I want us to get to know each other, I'll just, I'm not going to like do professional readings for you anymore. I've seen it where sometimes they're still like giving them personal information, or like commenting on their personal life. And there's already this dynamic where they had that permission, and things can get just so messy. So this is where, it's difficult to tell someone who already doesn't have good boundaries that you need to have good boundaries, because part of this isn't just something that you hear, but you have to, sometimes it takes a while to figure out. But I think the important thing to know is how much damage you can do if you're not clear with someone else. And if you're not clear, then I would say go get some help in this area. Like if you're attracted to your client or to a student or to something like that in relation to your intuitive or spiritual work, then go talk to some other professionals and say, here's the situation. How should I handle this? And then you need to be really clear, like, don't be using your psychic abilities to try to get an advantage, to try to manipulate the person, to try to get them to stay interested in you. And I've seen this happen. I don't want to appear sexist, but this, in my experience, this has happened more with like men than with women, but I'm sure it happens with women. It's just not been, brought to my attention so much. So let's see, just as soon as you can, separate out the roles and just be really careful with not continuing to stay in that role. But again, just know that it can be perceived as like strange or kind of hurtful. And I'll just give you a really quick example. This was with a therapist I was seeing. years ago when I was trying to deal with a relationship, and I was already like feeling rejected by this guy I was dating, who it was kind of on again, off again. And so I was going to this therapist just to, because a neighbor had recommended him. And I saw him a few times, and he would do these things like, this was part of his practice, but like I'd be sitting on the couch and I'd go to his house. It was in his house, in his living room. And he'd like sit down on the floor at my feet while we were talking. I don't know why he did that, but I think like it was so that we didn't have these power imbalances. But then one day when I broke up with my boyfriend and I was telling him about this, he suddenly interrupted me and he said, you know what, maybe you should go out with me instead. And then I was like, what? And he was like, well, every time you've talked about him, I've just felt like, why are you going out with this jerk? And you could be going out with me. And he was like, would you want to explore that? And here I'm in my therapy session and he's like sitting on the floor at my feet. And I was feeling like something going on there with him. So I started to consider it. Like I got confused and I was like, well, you know, maybe that would be kind of cool to go out with this guy. He's so smart and everything. And then I got a phone call from him about 24 hours later. He left me a voicemail message. And on my voicemail, he said, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have said what I did. I'm going to leave therapy. You're my final client and I'm not going to be able to see you again. Have a nice life. So my therapist broke up with me, which was the whole issue I was seeing him was rejections. He did it on my voicemail and he asked me to go out with him in the middle of our session. So this was now what, like 22 years ago, but it still is like as if it was yesterday because it was just so messy and so weird. And yeah. And the thing is that people can get very confused. It's not to say it would have been a bad thing to go out with him, but a lot of times for practitioners, you know, your clients might get attracted to you and they're not always going to like respond in the best way. So it's up to you to take the lead because you're more in that powerful position. All right. Power dynamics. So guru syndrome, what is it and how to avoid? People will look up to you, and especially since you're psychic or intuitive, they're going to think that you know a lot. They're going to think that you are psychic every single second and that you know everything. And the moment you think of them, you have all answers. Oops. I got a little excited there. So they're going to already be putting you on a pedestal. And, you know, at some point, no one ever stays on that pedestal because everyone's just a real person. And I don't care how talented or wonderful anyone is, we all are human. We all have our flaws on many different levels. And so we can mitigate this by being real and by not trying to hide our flaws. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, that you, every time you feel like you're a mess, that you like, you know, put that on Facebook or let everybody know that you're a mess. But just giving a realistic assessment of yourself and not trying to be anything other than you are. And if people do seem to want to like put you to that status, to not play into that, you know, but to always be kind to people and to, you know, just make it known that you're a real person, because this can be just damaging to people to let them think something is the case when it isn't really. We all have to just let everyone know that we're all just regular people here. There's probably more I could say about that, but getting a little tired here. So let's see, anything else? If you do exchanges with people, that's a great way to learn and to practice. If you agree to do an exchange with somebody else, if let's say you read them and then they just don't seem to want to reciprocate, I would say just let it go, even though that might feel unfair. Sometimes they may like feel intimidated, like, oh, they gave me such a great session, or maybe the opposite. But if you reach out a few times and they don't like respond, well, that kind of sucks. I mean, you could ask them about it, but don't make them. It's not going to go well if you make them. Anything else? If you're not sure of someone's intentions, you could always just ask them. Creating an ethical practice. So just to summarize, again, Thean wrote these and I totally agreed with them. Be humble and dedicated to helping others. Set the right energy. Carefully evaluate your motives. Be compassionate. Transparency is key. If you're having a bad day, you can let people know you're having a bad day. Understanding your practice thoroughly, be a perpetual student, and have a healthy work and life balance. And do we have any questions? We are at the end of our outline.
I just thought that was amazing. Yeah. I personally don't. I think you really covered a lot very well. So if any of you have any questions for Deborah.
Yeah, feel free just to unmute yourself, or if you want to put your hand up or put it in the chat. All right, not seeing anything. Everyone might be asleep at this point.
No, I the great thing about a lot of us are here from ISC. So yeah, she was Sam just said you were so thorough. Just thank you, Deborah and Than, Cece, and everyone for all your input. It was much appreciated. Yeah, Casey said not asleep. It was everything. I feel like that you covered is a lot is what we've been all kind of talking about, questioning, and it was really helpful to hear from you, especially about our practice and how those tough experiences. I mean, Cece and I were I know the reunion that you have been talking about. So Nick has been talking about that on meetings. We should ask Deborah to do a reunion class. And oh my gosh, that would be so much fun. But yeah.
Well, thank you guys for hanging in there. I know it can be a lot to just like be talked at for 3 hours straight. I tend to try to not do that, but
no, I just feel bad for you. I think we all just truly enjoyed it. And, even the ones that had to leave, they were, asking me if we were going to record it. So, yeah, definitely, a lot of information and very helpful, especially as tomorrow we onboard onto the site. So we're really excited about that. So that's going to be helpful. And especially when you're talking about the energy exchanges, and because we do that as well within the site, so that we can give honest feedback, because our thing is, we'll give each other reviews and things like that on the site. So that's definitely really helpful.
oh, great.
That's a great class.
Yeah, well, good luck with that. I'm so excited for it and to hear how it all goes. And it'll be really fun to hear about your success. I know it's going to be monumental. So
thank you so much. I'm it's been a little over a year now in waiting. So I was saying today, like, it feels almost surreal. Like I feel like I've been just building for so long that I'm probably gonna be a little emotional tomorrow, but I'm very excited.
That'll be fun to hear all about it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, take care, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Deborah, for being here and giving us this amazing talk and now a recording that we can utilize for all the other practitioners that come on, for them to see what real intuitive practice ethics are about. So thank you so much for being here.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Everyone.
You too. Bye, Deborah. Bye, everyone.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Night.